But when we're talking about Trump, we're obviously talking about a kind of delusional madness, such as General Milley was talking about, that is on a scale and a scope that we have never experienced in an American president in our history. I think we need to calmly step back and maybe look at Trump in a different context. He is our own American war criminal. Of a kind we've never experienced before.
You just said war criminal. What do you mean, war criminal?
I did. Well, in international law, there have been, quote, crimes against humanity. I think what we're talking about, Trump's crimes as an American war criminal in his own country that he has perpetrated upon our people, including the tens of thousands of people who died because of his homicidal negligence in the pandemic, putting his own electoral interests above the health of our people as they were slaughtered in this pandemic. Looking at his actions in terms of fomenting a coup to hold on to office in which the head of the American military, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has now compared Trump, not the press, not reporters comparing Trump to Hitler, but rather the head of the American military comparing him and his movement to brownshirts, to the Reichstag fire. This is a huge wake-up call to this country when General Milley, the head of the American military, has said this. And it fits as a piece with something so extraordinary in our history. It's not political. Trump is not just political. He transcends the political, and we need to start looking at his crimes in that context.
Here's my question for you, Ben Rhodes. This is absolutely political. These are the political supporters of the most prominent politician in the Republican Party. Of course this is political. And I'm not arguing that this was a good idea, but September 11th was in the foreground of the midterm elections in 2002 when Bush's party held Congress. And I wonder what your advice is. I think the security questions of the Republican Party as a domestic terror threat that were raised by the police officers whose political affiliation is unknown should be front and center for the Democrats in these midterm elections.
Yeah, absolutely, Nicole. This is a message that the Democrats should absolutely be driving between now and the election, because it gets at the fundamental hypocrisy of the Republican Party that uses language about law and order and about law enforcement to conceal the fact that they, in fact, are the danger to democracy. And they are the ones who won't even back up the very police officers who protect them.
I hope they're listening to you.
It feels like things have actually gotten worse since January 6th, honestly. You know, I remember reading the reports about when Trump began his run for office, he inspired an uptick in white nationalism and in violent white nationalism.
I think it's much worse than it was on January 6th. It's much worse than it was in November. It's much worse after January 6th. And part of the problem is because there's been no accountability, it's given permission to do more of this. What would happen if after 9/11 we had done nothing? We had done nothing. Right. Think about that. If we had done nothing after 9/11. And to me, though there was less loss of life on January 6th, January 6th was worse than 9/11 because it's continued to rip our country apart and give permission for people to pursue autocratic means. And so I think we're at a much worse place than we've been. And as I've said, I think to you before, I think we're in the most perilous point in time since 1861 in the advent of the Civil War.
I do too. I do too. And it frightens me. You know what scares me the most, Matthew, is that I'm not sure that most Democrats, at least elected Democrats in Washington, agree with us or are afraid as we are. I said yesterday, talking with Malcolm Nance and Susan Del Percio, who's a Republican strategist, that if you break down what this looks like to me, it looks directly like fascism. It looks like Mussolini's Italy.